The president made his announcement by declaring old challenges demand new approaches.
But today we finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. This is nothing more or less than a recognition of reality. It is also the right thing to do.
With this single act, President Trump has upended the careful dance of presidents past who embraced the concept of recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving the US embassy to Jerusalem, but adhered to the view that until there was a definitive peace agreement between Israelis and Palestinians, the ancient city's status could not be settled. As candidate last year, he gave his word to the Israel lobby. He was different.
When I become president, the days of treating Israel like a second-class citizen will end on day one.
In truth, it's taken nearly a year for the president to get this far, and he does so despite warnings that it will implode the status quo and any prospect of peace.
There will, of course, be disagreement and dissent regarding this announcement. But we are confident that ultimately, as we work through these disagreements, we will arrive at a peace and a place far greater in understanding and cooperation.
This was the role in which the US cast itself previously, a broker of peace, not a taker of sides. From Jimmy Carter to Bill Clinton, the president always sought the middle ground. Not President Trump, and there's more at play here than rewarding Israel's loyalty and satisfying America's religious right. He wants to recast the Middle East and face down Iran. With his colourful embrace of Saudi Arabia and new outreach to Israel, he has two of Tehran's fiercest enemies on his side. Just to stay in step, maybe Riyadh won't complain too much on the part of the Palestinians.
We want an agreement that is a great deal for the Israelis and a great deal for the Palestinians. We are not taking a position of any final status issues, including the specific boundaries of the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the resolution of contested borders.
But critics warn the president has given a gift to Israel before his son-in-law's peace-brokering efforts really get underway, imposing terms no Palestinian leader could ever agree to.
Even before the announcement, Palestinians were out burning flags and images of Donald Trump, an American president who doesn't even try to appear even-handed on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's alarmed leaders who fear that today's announcement will fan the flames across the Middle East.
There is no alternative to the two-state solution, and Jerusalem is key to any peace agreement, and it is key to the stability of the entire region. Now, ignoring the Palestinian Muslim and Christian rights in Jerusalem will only fuel further extremism and undermine the war against terrorism.
This morning, the Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu, by contrast, was looking pretty pleased, and tonight he was exultant.
This decision reflects the president's commitment to an ancient but enduring truth, to fulfilling his promises, and to advancing peace. The president's decision is an important step towards peace, for there is no peace that doesn't include Jerusalem as the capital of the State of Israel.
Both Israel and the Palestinians regard Jerusalem as their capital. The issue goes to the heart of the conflict. In 1949, the Israelis moved their government institutions from Tel Aviv to West Jerusalem, but foreign embassies remained in Tel Aviv because the status of Jerusalem was disputed. East Jerusalem, home to the sacred sites of Judaism, Christianity and Islam, remained under Jordanian control. But in 1967, Israel seized the east of the city in the Six-Day War and then annexed it, a move that has never been accepted by the international community. Today, the Dome of the Rock rose undisturbed from the famous skyline, but Jerusalem has frequently been a flashpoint for violence. In 2000, the then Israeli opposition leader Ariel Sharon visited the Muslim holy site in a deliberate provocation. He said it was his right as a Jew to go there, but the visit triggered the Second Intifada, or uprising, in which thousands of people, mostly Palestinians, were killed. Palestinians have been evicted from their homes in East Jerusalem as Israeli groups systematically buy up Arab land and houses. This July, in reaction to the killing of 2 Israeli police officers, the Israelis installed a system of metal detectors on Palestinians entering the mosque at Haram al-Sharif without consulting the mosque authorities, again sparking violent protests. The plan to move the US embassy from Tel Aviv is a huge blow to the Palestinians. Mr. Trump didn't acknowledge their claim on Jerusalem at all.
It does represent a departure, very serious departure from established American positions that were followed and adopted by successive American administrations. It also represents a grave violation of international law.
Some say President Trump's announcement is a symbolic gesture. Nothing will change on the ground. But this is a conflict where people kill and die to defend symbols.
Well, I hope to be joined shortly from Washington, D.C. by Hussam Zomlot, the Palestinians' chief delegate to the U.S. and senior advisor to President Mahmoud Abbas. But first, the human rights lawyer and political analyst Arsen Ostrovsky joins me from Tel Aviv. Mr. Ostrovsky, the Palestinians have described this decision today as a kiss of death. The U.S. ally, Saudi Arabia, has said this is a flagrant provocation to Muslims. And this decision has been taken by the president who boasted he could bring peace to the Middle East.
Look, I think we need to put this in context. As President Trump said in his remarks, that today we finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital, and that is just acknowledging the reality, and that is also the right thing to do. With all due respect to the Palestinians, the only reason we are here today is through their incessant refusal to negotiate in good faith with the Israelis for a two-state solution, which they purportedly so desire. At the end of the day, what President Trump did was simply correct a long overdue injustice in recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
But what President Trump didn't do was recognize in any way that the Palestinians claim Jerusalem as their capital.
Look, he did also add that I'm paraphrasing, that in the negotiation between the parties, if another agreement is reached between them, then he will accept that, and noting that he didn't define where the borders are. But the reality is, and we need to be also very clear about this, is that Jerusalem has been the capital city of the Jewish people, and only the Jewish people, throughout history. This year we marked 50 years of the reunification of the city, but yet the Jewish people's connection to it extends to well over 3,000 years. The seat of government, the Knesset is here, the High Court, all the institutions. The unfortunate reality is that had the Palestinians accepted past agreements, including very generous offers with respect to Jerusalem, such as at Camp David in 2000, the situation could be very different today. But we are faced with a new set of realities and a new administration.
But excuse me for interrupting. The other unfortunate reality is that there's no longer any pretense that the US are honest brokers here in any future negotiations, is there?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I think all the US has done is just acknowledge the reality. Jerusalem has been the capital of the State of Israel for 70 years, but of the Jewish people for over 3,000 years. London has been the capital of England only since the 12th century. So there's, in one way, this is a very historic decision, announcement, but on the other hand, it's also just really stating the obvious, that this is the capital of the State of Israel. Every country under international law, with the exception of Israel here, is permitted to designate its own capital. But Israel has been the only country since 1948 which has been denied that right.
Okay.
So this action, I think, is very much one that corrects an injustice.
Okay, Arsen Ostrovsky, thank you very much for joining me. Let's turn now to Hussam Zomlot, Palestinians' chief delegate to the US. Thank you very much for joining us. I don't know whether you heard any of that last guest, but Jerusalem it's where the Israeli government is. This is recognizing a reality, and it's long overdue, is what he said.
That's absolutely not true. Today, President Trump has just adopted fully the narrative and the myths of the very few actually in Israel, the settler government, the very extreme wing of the Israeli government. The majority of the Israelis still want to see a two-state solution on the 1967 borders. That's all polls. So are the majority of the Palestinian people and the rest of the world. Global consensus. Today was a black day for peace in the Middle East because President Trump has decided to let go of everything that we have worked towards. Today is a black day also for the prospects for the U.S. to be a fair and honest broker in this, because it has done a self-inflicted disqualification, and today also has demolished the basis of the peace process that we have been engaged in for the last 25 years.
So what are the consequences of that? I mean, will President Mahmoud Abbas refuse to negotiate through the US with Israel, for example?
Negotiate on what? In 1991, we started this peace process, and we started it after a letter of invitation and guarantee we received from Secretary of State James Baker, Bush the father, the administration, and in that letter, which I have with me now, in that letter, the U.S. confirmed and committed that the peace process will be based on the UN Security Council resolutions 242 and 338. That means that Israel must end its occupation that began in 1967, including East Jerusalem as an occupied city. Number two, that the U.S. confirms its commitment never to change the status of Jerusalem, and that Jerusalem East is occupied, and that the U.S. will never recognize Israel's control of the city or annexation of the city. That's written letter. And on that basis, we entered the peace process because Jerusalem is the heart of the two-state solution. And now we have this stab in the back, a sudden U-turn from the U.S. administration, and you tell me what would be the consequences? The consequences is the peace process has been emptied of its soul and heart, and we are not interested in an empty peace process. We are seriously, genuinely, and sincerely interested in a genuine peace process that will produce the international consensus about a two-state solution. But should this option be killed by
we're a little bit short of time, and I'm trying to have a dialogue here. If I could just say, I mean, the Saudis today, they reacted much the same way you've reacted, calling this a flagrant provocation. But isn't it the case that they'd be loath to whip up any demonstrations because the US is their ally in the fight against Iran?
And that's exactly the right question, because by doing this, President Trump has delivered a severe blow to the historic and strategic allies of the US for all these years, including Saudi Arabia, including Jordan, Egypt, all the Arab countries that are in alliance with the US, and has just given a precious gift to the extremist, to the anarchist, to the Armageddonist, to those who want to see this conflict as a religious one, the war of gods, rather than a political and legal one to be resolved. He totally and utterly, that is President Trump, adopted the myths and the narratives that does not speak of reality. Let me remind you and your viewers, please, that East Jerusalem is owned by Palestinians. This is not a claim. This is not a claim
really sorry.
We're
going to have to end it there, I'm afraid. I would love to carry on talking longer, but Hussam Zomlot, thank you very much.